Germany, India and the temptation of cheap Russian energy. As gas imports from Russia increased, Germany was building fewer wind turbines. An Indian environmental researcher is now warning his country not to make the same mistake. In his video message at the start of this year's COP27 World Climate Conference, German Minister of Economics and Climate Protection Robert Habeck says Germany has a special responsibility to demonstrate that climate protection is possible. Precisely because Germany has all the options, all eyes are on Germany. But is this really still the case? For a long time, the Central European country presented itself to the world as a political pioneer in climate protection. In the early 2000s, Germany began building large-scale wind turbines, both onshore and offshore. Euphoric homeowners took advantage of generous subsidies and installed photovoltaic systems on their roofs. In the eastern German state of Brandenburg, a factory for the production of solar panels made in Germany was built, until the operating company went bankrupt and the business migrated to China. In recent years, German politicians have repeatedly referred to the expansion of renewable and CO2-neutral energy sources, wind energy, solar energy or even biomass, i.e., the production of gas from plants. Until the Russian invasion of Ukraine on February 24 this year, the Germans considered Russian natural gas, in particular, to be a transitional energy on the way to climate neutrality in heat and power production. Apparently with fatal consequences for the expansion of renewable energy sources. First drop in green electricity generation in 2021. According to a study by the German Federal Environment Agency, the country's main environmental protection agency, electricity production from renewable energy sources in Germany declined on average annually in 2021 for the first time since 2010. While 251.1 billion kilowatt-hours were still produced in Germany in 2020, mainly from wind or solar power, it was only 233.6 billion kilowatt-hours last year. Mainly due to the again lower capacity expansion, writes the Federal Environment Agency in its report. In the previous decade, Germany's green electricity production was still increasing every year. The curve in the Federal Environment Agency's graph does not point steeply, but steadily upwards, until the slump in 2021 of more than 17 billion fewer kilowatt-hours produced compared to the previous year. This contrasts with another curve that has been steadily rising over the past decade, the import of Russian natural gas, mainly via the Nord Stream 1 Baltic Sea pipeline, opened in 2011. And even more, in 2014, the German government approved the construction of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, stung after Russia's illegal annexation of the Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea. Last year, in 2021, the share of German gas imports from Russia then rose to almost 60%. The country thus became extremely dependent on Russia. The global climate, getting hotter and hotter. At the start of this year's World Climate Conference, COP27, in Egypt, the UN Meteorological Organization presented another analysis curve for almost the same period. The climate curve for global warming points sharply upwards. Earth's temperatures over the past 8 years have been the warmest in history, writes the UN organization, since man has recorded climate data. All the more reason for the German Minister of Economics and Climate Protection and simultaneous Vice-Chancellor, Robert Habeck, to now try to create a euphoria for the expansion of renewable energy similar to that of more than a decade ago, when there was already a Vice-Chancellor of his Environmental Protection Party Bündnis 90/Die Grünen. If Germany succeeds, Habeck said in his video message at COP27, then all countries will not be able to talk their way out. That's what it means for industrialized countries to lead the way. What he doesn't say in the video is this: it is clear that Germany has long since failed to expand renewable energy sources, at least compared to the lofty targets of more than a decade ago. Meanwhile, there are many other countries in the world that are more euphoric about renewables. Is India becoming a green superpower? The British business magazine Economist recently asked in an extensive report on the green boom in the subcontinent. Indeed, India has the highest growth rate in renewable energy generation of all major economies, the World Bank wrote this year in an analysis of the expansion of green energy production in emerging economies. In FY 2020-21, New Delhi mobilized investments worth €14.4 billion, compared with the equivalent of just €8.4 billion in FY 2019-2020, which included the last 6 months before the corona pandemic. By comparison, Germany raised $11 billion for it in 2020, according to the Federal Environment Agency. Germany-India comparison. In an interview with DW, Indian environmental expert and former head of the Greenpeace office in New Delhi, Nandip Shivlingam, also draws attention to comparisons between India on the one hand and the EU or the industrialized country of Germany on the other. He is of the opinion that India has a growing demand due to its large population and that Indian purchases are no different from European ones. By this he means the purchase of gas as well as oil from Russia. This is because while the EU has gradually started to abandon Russian raw material supplies since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, India is increasing its purchase of Russian crude. Some of the Russian crude is refined in India and sold in turn to Europe or the United States. The Indian energy expert is now the director of the Finland-registered Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, CREA. His institute has analyzed the consequences of dependence on Russian oil and gas in 2 studies. Fossil fuels continue to fill the Kremlin's war chests due to high prices, CREA writes in the analysis Putin's war finance, fossil fuel exports from Russia in the first 6 months after the invasion of Ukraine. And in another study, Nandip Shivlingam and his researchers point out how Germany has maneuvered itself into high dependence on Russia through its own fault. According to the study, wind power expansion in Germany stagnated, slowing after 2015 and falling far behind the rest of Europe. What's more, if Europe's largest economy had followed the same growth path as the rest of Europe, installed wind power capacity would have been 32 gigawatts higher by the end of 2021. That would be equivalent to the power generated by the 6 German nuclear power plants that were still in operation in 2021, and would have replaced more gas than was imported through the Nord Stream 1 pipeline in July, before the shutdown at the end of August. Thus, referring to his home country of India, the Indian environmental expert warns against new oil deals with Russia. The lesson for New Delhi from Russia's war against Ukraine, he says, should be to diversify its energy options in the long term, stop relying on a handful of countries for its growing energy needs, and continue to massively expand the transition to renewables over the next 5 to 6 years. Presumably, this means that India should not make the same mistake that Germany made.